In our journey through life, we are encouraged by Allah to plan and make efforts towards our goals. It's crucial to remember that if things don't go according to the way we intended, then it's perfectly okay. We don't need to be too hard on ourselves. Remember that Allah is in control, and He is indeed the best of planners. A profound lesson of this can be found at the beginning of the story of Musa alayhi salam, where Allah beautifully illustrates this concept. The story teaches us that when we think that our own plans have faltered, Allah's wisdom and mercy are at work in ways we may not immediately understand. Trusting in Allah means recognizing that He sees and understands everything, orchestrating events for the ultimate good. As Musa's story is retold, you will begin to understand how events unfold in ways that seem confusing or even devastating at first. Each moment of uncertainty, each twist and turn was part of a greater plan that ultimately led to Musa's prophetic mission and the liberation of his people. Our story begins with the cries of a baby boy that would soon echo through the land of Egypt, setting in motion a series of events that would shake the very foundations of the Pharaoh's kingdom. After Prophet Yusuf's reign and eventual demise, Egyptian rulers reclaimed back leadership over the kingdom of Egypt. As the years went by, kings came and went, while the descendants of Yaqub multiplied, living prosperous lives and integrating well into Egyptian society. Initially, the kings were unconcerned, even welcoming them for their loyalty and the wisdom they brought to positions of influence. As each generation expanded, the growing numbers of the tribes of Israel caught the attention of the king's advisors. They began to voice their unease, warning that the rapid increase in population could one day pose a threat to the stability of their kingdom. Later kings began to heed the warnings of their advisors, and eventually doubt set in. At first, only the more influential people were removed from places of authority and power. Then, over time, their living standards were reduced until they were no longer paid reasonable wages. Gradually, their rights as citizens of Egypt were stripped away, and as a result, they were turned into slaves. This way, they would remain weak, having no power or desire to revolt. The once great nation established by Yusuf and his brothers became a forgotten tale in the pages of history. Their descendants lived lives of misery and torture, far removed from the prosperity and influence their forefathers once enjoyed. Each successive king, or Pharaoh as they were now referred to, sought to outshine their predecessor, striving to make Egypt more grandiose. This required an ever-increasing amount of labor, and so the tribes of Israel became the tools to achieve this ambition. This carried on until eventually a pharaoh emerged who was unlike any other. This pharaoh harbored a grand delusion of divinity, proclaiming himself as a god amongst men. This self-defecation was not merely a symbolic gesture, it was the cornerstone of his tyrannical rule. He demanded absolute obedience and reverence, punishing any opposition with ruthless execution. It is documented through scholars that this pharaoh's name was Ramses II. Allah in the Quran refers to Ramses as Pharaoh, a title reserved for him. As the story continues, this is the title by which he will be known. Pharaoh was a formidable individual, both physically and mentally, endowed with a sound mind and a zeal to make his reign over Egypt magnificent. Under his reign, Egypt became a land of fear and oppression, where his decrees were enforced with an iron fist. The greatness of his monuments and the scale of his projects were not only testaments to his power, but also stark reminders of his God complex, as he sought to immortalize his reign and venerate his existence. No expense was too great, and with an almost infinite number of slaves, his vision and dream seemed within reach. Pharaoh made sure that the fear of his name was deeply engraved, especially in the hearts of the tribes of Israel, who were now referred to as the Hebrews. At any given time, he would send his soldiers into their camps to disrupt their lives, causing fear and anxiety. He towered over them with his might, ensuring no one had the courage to meet his gaze. Anyone who dared to defy him was made an example of, discouraging others from making the same mistake. Under Pharaoh's rule, the children of Israel faced relentless oppression. Their days were filled with back-breaking labor, building the grand monuments and cities that would immortalize Pharaoh's name. It was during this time of extreme hardship that a prophecy began to circulate amongst the people of Israel. It spoke of a deliverer, a leader who would rise from amongst them and lead them out of bondage. This prophecy rekindled a spark of hope in their hearts. They clung to this, believing that their deliverance was near. It is narrated by scholars that one day Pharaoh had a dream in which he saw a fire coming out of the city of modern-day Palestine, which burned everything in his kingdom except the land of the children of Israel. Immediately after waking, he ordered his council of sorcerers to interpret this. According to their knowledge and mystical insights, they interpreted to the Pharaoh that a boy would soon be born amongst the people of Israel, who, if not killed, would grow up to destroy him and his kingdom. This prophecy struck fear into Pharaoh's heart, and without hesitation, he ordered his soldiers to go instantly and mercilessly kill every newborn Hebrew boy. The command spread like wildfire through the camps, filling the hearts of the people with terror and sorrow. Soldiers stormed through their settlements, ripping infants from their mothers' arms and executing Pharaoh's brutal decree. The cries of grieving families echoed through the land, and despair settled heavily over the children of Israel. As time went on, Pharaoh was advised by his counselors that if he continued to kill all the newborn boys, a time would come that he would have no slaves left to sustain the majesty he envisioned for Egypt. Recognizing the long-term implications, Pharaoh modified his decree. He decided to implement a new strategy. From now on, all new Hebrew boys would be killed every other year and spared in between. One day, a Hebrew boy was born during the year when baby boys were not to be killed. This boy was named Haroon. A few years later, in the same household, the mother found herself pregnant again, but this time she was due to give birth in a year when newborn boys were to be killed. She hid her pregnancy well, and so Pharaoh's soldiers were not aware that she was expecting a child. She remained vigilant and spoke of her pregnancy to no one so that the news would not leak. When the baby was born, it was indeed a boy. Despite the imminent danger, the mother felt an overwhelming desire to keep him for as long as she could and to nurse him. As the days passed, it became increasingly difficult to conceal the baby's presence. Realizing that she could not hide him indefinitely, she devised a desperate yet hopeful plan. With meticulous care, she wove a small basket and gently placed her baby inside. In the early hours of the morning, she slipped out and set the basket adrift on the River Nile, whilst praying to Allah for his protection. From a discreet distance, Maryam, the baby's older sister, kept a vigilant watch, her eyes fixed on the basket as it floated away. The basket, carrying the baby, drifted along the Nile until it came to rest near the palace where Pharaoh and his wife Asiya were strolling. Intrigued, Asiya approached the basket. Seeing the child inside, she was struck by his innocence and beauty. She hesitated for a moment, but then spoke to her husband, the Pharaoh. "This baby will be a comfort of the eyes for me and for you. Do not kill him. Perhaps he may benefit us, or we may adopt him as a son." Pharaoh, who himself could not father a child, looked at Asiya and saw the longing in her eyes. Her suggestion resonated with him. With a rare smile crossing his face, he nodded in agreement. Asiya's face lit up with joy as she cradled the baby in her arms. "I will name you Musa," she said softly into his ears, "the one that was pulled out of the water." Maryam rushed back to her mother with the startling news that the basket had ended up at the Pharaoh's palace and that they had taken the baby in. Overwhelmed with worry, the mother feared that her son had fallen into the very hands she wanted to avoid. However, Allah the Most Merciful, the Most Wise, eased her heart, allowing her to keep her emotions in check. She found solace in knowing that for now her son was safe. The next morning, the mother of Musa instructed Maryam to return to the palace gates and listen for any news about her brother. Obedient to her mother, Maryam lingered near the courtyard. It wasn't long before she overheard whispers amongst the palace guards about a baby boy who was in need of a nursing mother. Pharaoh had arranged for several women to come forward, but to everyone's surprise, the baby had rejected them all. Maryam's heart raced as she contemplated her next move. With her head low and eyes fixed on the ground, she approached the guards cautiously. Summoning her courage, she spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please tell Pharaoh that I know of a woman whose milk no baby has ever rejected." The guards, intrigued by Maryam's confidence and sincerity, relayed her message to Pharaoh. Curious and perhaps amused by the boldness of her suggestion, Pharaoh agreed to let the mother of Maryam come to the palace. The mother, her heart pounding with fear, followed the guards into Pharaoh's presence. As she entered the grand halls of the palace, she saw her precious son, cradled in the arms of Pharaoh's wife Asiya. The sight filled her with gratitude that he was alive and safe. With tears welling in her eyes, the mother gently took Musa into her arms and began to feed him. The cries of Musa ceased within the palace walls. Allah, in His majestic plan, had orchestrated a reunion between mother and child. The mother of Musa was brought back to him, and now, within the luxurious confines of Pharaoh's household, she nursed her son and watched him grow. In the house of Pharaoh, Musa thrived, growing strong and wise under the care of Asiya and the education provided by Egyptian tutors. Little did Pharaoh know that the very boy he was nurturing and educating would one day be the reason for his downfall. As Musa matured into a man, he exhibited physical strength and keen judgment. Despite his privileged upbringing, Musa developed a strong sense of justice and compassion. He possessed a deep moral conviction and a boldness to confront wrongdoing, even within the walls of Pharaoh's palace. Musa was not one to shy away from speaking his mind. One day, Musa walked through the city during mid-afternoon when the vast majority of people were resting. On his walk, he encountered an Egyptian soldier arguing with a Hebrew slave. Knowing how the soldiers would seize any opportunity to exert force on them, Musa felt compelled to intervene. With a swift and forceful punch, he aimed to stop the soldier from harming the man. However, the blow proved fatal and the soldier fell to the ground, dead. Musa stood there in shock, realizing the unintended consequence of his actions. He had not meant to kill the soldier. He only sought to defend the oppressed and uphold justice. In his shock and remorse, Musa whispered, "My lord, I have clearly wronged myself. Please forgive me." The Hebrew man witnessing the incident fled in fear, leaving Musa alone with the lifeless body of the soldier. Panic set in as Musa quickly glanced around, ensuring no one else had seen what had transpired. Musa hurried back to the palace, his mind racing with the potential repercussions. He spent the night in a state of heightened worry, listening for any sign that the Pharaoh guards might have discovered the body. He feared that a search party would be dispatched to find the perpetrator of the soldier's death. In the morning, Musa, driven by a mix of curiosity and worry, returned to the same area where the incident had occurred. He needed to know if the body of the soldier was still there. As he approached the scene, he was startled to see the same Hebrew slave engaged in a heated argument with another soldier. He walked up to the men, intending to defuse the situation. However, before he could intervene, the Hebrew, recognizing Musa, spoke out in fear. "Are you going to kill me, just as you killed the soldier yesterday?" Musa's blood ran cold as he realized what the man had just said. The soldier's eyes widened with shock and realization. He turned and fled, heading straight to report the incident to the rest of Pharaoh's forces. Musa felt a surge of panic. He knew that his actions from the previous day had been exposed, and it was only a matter of time before Pharaoh's soldiers would come for him. His life in Egypt was no longer safe. It just so happened that a man in the palace overheard the conversation about Musa's actions and the plans that was being set up to kill him. Feeling a sense of duty, he discreetly made his way to Musa, determined to warn him. Upon receiving the warning, Musa grabbed what few belongings he could gather and under the cover of night, fled from the palace. For 7 nights, Musa traveled eastwards from Egypt, facing the harsh realities of the desert. The scorching sun beat down mercilessly during the day, and the cold desert winds bit at him during the night. He made shelters wherever he could, using rocks and sparse vegetation to shield him from the elements. Each day was a test of endurance, but Musa pressed on, driven by the need to survive and to find refuge. Eventually weary and famished, Musa arrived in a place called Midian. His journey had taken a toll on him. He was hungry, thirsty, and exhausted. As he entered the town, he headed towards the central well, hoping to find some water and rest. At the well, he noticed a group of shepherds drawing water for their flocks. Among the crowd, he spotted 2 women standing aside. The women watched the shepherds drawing water, but they themselves didn't join the queue. Curious and concerned, he approached them and asked, "Why are you not queuing for the water?" The women looked at each other before one of them spoke. "We only take water when everyone else has finished. Our father is old and cannot come himself, so it is our duty to fetch the water." Despite his own fatigue, Musa's sense of justice was once again ignited. He stepped forward and intervened, driving away the other shepherds and assisting the women in drawing water for their flocks. They thanked him gratefully and went back towards their home, relieved by his kindness. After helping the women, Musa sought a place to rest. He found a tree nearby and sat down under its shade, his heart heavy with the weight of his recent experiences. As he rested, he supplicated to his Lord, asking for guidance and assistance in his time of need. "My Lord, indeed, I am in need of whatever good you would send down to me," he prayed, his voice a quiet whisper of hope and faith. Meanwhile, upon returning home, the 2 women told their father about the stranger who had come to their aid. Their father, who scholars have said was named Shoaib, was intrigued and impressed by Musa's actions. He sent them back and told them to invite him home as his honored guest. One of the women he had helped returned to the well. She saw Musa sitting under the tree and walked slowly and modestly towards him. When she approached, she said, "My father wishes to meet you." Musa rose from his place and nodded. The woman, noticing Musa's weariness, said, I have arranged a camel for you." However, to her astonishment, Musa gently replied, "Please, you sit on the camel. I will walk in front, and you can guide me from behind the path to your father." The woman, touched by Musa's respect and kindness, climbed onto the camel. As they made their way towards her home, she gave him directions. Musa led the camel, ensuring that she was comfortable and safe. Their journey continued in a quiet, respectful manner, allowing both to reflect on the day's events. Upon reaching the home of Shuaib, the woman dismounted and led Musa inside. Shuaib greeted him warmly, his wise eyes observing the noble character of the man before him. "Peace be on you," Shuaib said. "My daughters have told me of your kindness at the well. Please, join us for a meal." Musa accepted the invitation, feeling a sense of relief and comfort in the presence of these hospitable people. Over the meal, he shared his story with Shuaib, recounting the events that had led him to flee Egypt and seek refuge in Midian. Shuaib listened attentively, his face reflecting both concern and understanding. "You are welcome here, Musa," Shuaib said after hearing his tale. "Stay with us and consider Midian your home. We have need of a strong and just man like you." One of Shuaib's daughters, noticing Musa's strength and integrity, spoke to her father and said, "Why don't you employ him? He can take care of our flock. He is a man of strength and trustworthiness." Shuaib, considering his daughter's suggestion, approached Musa with a proposal. "Musa, you have shown great character and strength. I would like you to stay with us and work for me. I offer you one of my daughters in marriage. In return, I ask 8 years of your labor, and if you're able, extend it to 10 years. In the days that followed, Musa settled into life in Shuaib's household. He took on the responsibilities of a shepherd, tending to the flocks with diligence and proving himself to be trustworthy and capable. His life in Midian brought him peace and purpose, a stark contrast to the life he had fled from in Egypt. In becoming a shepherd tending to his flock, Musa underwent a transformation. Growing softer in nature, he developed a keen awareness of the subtle differences amongst the sheep, understanding their moods and how to effectively guide them. This period of caring for the flock was a preparation by Allah for what was to follow. As the end of the 8th year approached, Musa, out of respect and gratitude for Shuaib's kindness, chose to extend his service to 10 years. Shuaib, pleased with Musa's decision, treated him not just as a son-in-law, but as a son. The mutual respect and love between them strengthened the family bond. On the final day of his agreed service, Musa prepared to fulfill the next part of his destiny. He approached Shuaib, expressing his gratitude. "I have completed the years of labor you requested. Your kindness has been a blessing in my life. Now, I must seek my own path." Shuaib, understanding Musa's decision, blessed him and said, "Go with my blessings. You have been a faithful and honorable man. May Allah guide and protect you in your journey." With his family, Musa set out from Midian back towards Egypt, ready to embrace the future. As Musa and his family traveled through the desert, they faced the daunting challenge of navigating the vast, barren landscape. One night, as they were making their way through the darkness, Musa realized that they had lost their way. Whilst he was trying to navigate himself, Musa noticed a fire in the distance, flickering within a mountain. Hopeful that the fire might offer warmth, light, or even guidance, he turned to his wife and said, "Stay here. I see a fire in the distance. I will go and bring back some of it, or at the very least, find someone who can give us directions." With a reassuring look, Musa left his family and made his way towards the fire. The night was cold and the path treacherous, but Musa pressed on, his steps guided by the light ahead. As he approached the mountain, the fire grew brighter, casting a glow over the rocky terrain. He reached a narrow ledge, the final stretch before the peak. The fire's light now seemed almost within reach. Musa paused for a moment, looking back at the faint figures of his family far below, their forms barely visible in the darkness. Taking a deep breath, Musa turned back towards the fire and walked towards it. And so, on this fateful night in the vast desert, Musa's journey reached a pivotal moment. What he would learn in the next few moments would set him on a path that would alter the course of history.